Ladies and gentlemen, there is a truth in this world that many have forgotten. A truth as old as time, and yet in this fast-paced world of endless connection, we overlook it daily. What is rare is treasured. What is common becomes dismissed. You and I know this in our hearts. When something is available at every hour, in every place, it loses its value. The air we breathe is plentiful, but we take no notice of it. Yet the pearl deep within the ocean, hidden in the shell, is sought after, fought for, and cherished. Friends, I stand before you today to tell you, your time, your energy, your heart, they are precious gifts. If you give them away without thought, if you offer yourself too freely, the world will not thank you. No, they will begin to take you for granted. They will expect your constant presence and give no regard to the price you pay. Even our Lord, who walked among men, did not make himself available to all at all times. There were moments he withdrew to quiet places. He prayed alone on the mountainside. He understood that to be filled, one must sometimes be still. To lead, one must sometimes step away. But many today believe they must be everywhere for everyone at every moment, answering every call, replying to every message, running to every need. And yet they find themselves empty, tired, worn thin, like a coin passed through too many hands. Brothers and sisters, I ask you, how can you give your best when you have nothing left to give? How can you be valued if you make yourself cheap? Even the sun does not shine at midnight. Even the tide pulls back before it returns again. There is power in your absence. There is power in saying, not now, not out of pride, but out of wisdom, not out of arrogance, but out of understanding your worth. The world will not always applaud your boundaries. Some will be offended, some will be confused, but those who truly see your light will wait for it. They will cherish it when it shines. And so I urge you, step back when you need to. Rest when your heart is weary. You do not lose your place by stepping away. You strengthen it. You do not lose your voice by being silent for a while. You make it clearer. Your value is not in how much of yourself you give away. It is in the wisdom to know when to give and when to withhold. May you walk in that wisdom today. May you know your worth, and may your absence at times speak as powerfully as your presence. Rarity has always held a deep and undeniable influence over how we perceive value. Across cultures, times, and civilizations, the things that are hardest to find, the things that are not within everyone's grasp, are those that are cherished most. It's a principle deeply rooted in human nature. What is rare is often the most desired. The more common something becomes, the less it is treasured, and the more we take it for granted. Consider the precious metals and stones of the earth. Gold, silver, diamond. Why have these things been so sought after throughout human history? Why do we regard them as signs of wealth, power, and success? It is not only because they shine or because they are beautiful, but because they are rare. You cannot walk outside your door and find a diamond lying on the ground. You cannot stroll into a field and gather up gold from the soil. These treasures are buried deep. They are difficult to find and difficult to retrieve. Their very scarcity increases their value in our eyes. The harder something is to obtain, the more effort we must put forth to reach it, the more we appreciate it once it is in our hands. This principle does not apply only to things, but to people as well. We have all known individuals who seem to be everywhere, always available, always accessible. At first, we may be grateful for their presence. We may even marvel at their willingness to give their time so freely. But over time, something shifts in our minds. The constant presence becomes expected. It loses its impact. The person who is always there is often overlooked, their value diminished in the eyes of those who no longer need to make any effort to find them. Contrast that with the one who is less often seen, whose presence is not always guaranteed, whose time is carefully given, not freely spent on every passing whim. When such a person makes time for you, when they step into the room or offer you their attention, it carries a weight. You notice it. You value it more. You listen more closely. You appreciate more deeply because you understand that their time, their energy, and their presence are not given lightly. It is rare, and so it is treasured. Even in our relationships, this truth holds firm. People value what they must work for. Friendships that are taken for granted often fade away. Love that is constantly available without boundaries can be easily dismissed. But when a person has clear boundaries, when they honor their own time and spirit, they teach others to honor them as well. They become like the precious stone hidden deep in the mountain, something to be sought after, not something easily gained or carelessly held. Nature teaches us this lesson time and again. Think of the changing seasons. Spring, with its fresh blossoms and new life, is welcomed because it is not always with us. If it were spring all the time, we might forget the joy it brings after winter's cold. The same is true for the harvest. We value the fruits of the harvest because they are not present in every season. Their arrival marks a time of celebration, of thankfulness. It is their rarity that makes them special. Even the sun and the stars hold to this rhythm. The sun does not shine at all hours. It sets, it withdraws, and then it rises again. And when it does, we greet its light with renewed wonder. Imagine if the sun shone constantly, with no night to give us rest, no darkness to make us long for dawn. Would we not grow weary of its light? Would we not take it for granted and cease to appreciate its warmth? In much the same way, a person who is always available, always saying yes, always ready to give of themselves without pause, risks losing the very respect and value they wish to uphold. There is wisdom in understanding that too much availability can cheapen what is otherwise precious. The more common something becomes, the more easily it is dismissed, not because its true worth has changed, but because human nature often overlooks what is always at hand. This is not a call to pride or selfishness, but a call to wisdom. It is an invitation to recognize that your time, your presence, your attention are valuable resources. They are not infinite. When you offer them without measure, you may exhaust yourself and you may find that others stop seeing the gift that you bring. But when you take care of your time, when you choose wisely where you place your energy, you maintain the sense of worth that comes from being rare and treasured. It is the same with our words. A voice that speaks all the time may be drowned out in the noise of the world. But the one who speaks carefully with thought and intention, whose words are not always flowing but chosen with purpose, finds that their voice carries weight. People listen when they speak because their words are not common. They are rare. They are valued. In every area of life, rarity increases worth, whether it is a pearl in the ocean, a season of joy after a long winter, or a person who knows their value and lives by it. The things that are not always seen, not always available, are often those that leave the greatest impact. It is not in endless presence, but in thoughtful absence that we remind the world of our worth. And it is in our rarity that we become truly treasured. Overexposure is a quiet thief. It does not steal suddenly, nor does it announce its presence. It creeps in over time, dulling the shine that was once bright, softening the voice that was once powerful, and making common what was once rare and respected. It happens in ways that are often unseen at first. A person who is always present, always available, always within reach may find that what once drew admiration now invites disregard. What once was treasured is now taken for granted. And when familiarity grows unchecked, it can breed not only indifference, but at times even contempt. Human nature is such that we often fail to appreciate what we have easy access to. What requires little effort tends to be valued little in return. Something or someone that is always at our disposal begins to lose its uniqueness in our eyes. It becomes expected rather than appreciated. Think of a beautiful song. Heard once in a while, it moves the soul. Played endlessly, it loses its meaning. The melody that once stirred emotions becomes mere background noise. What was once a gift becomes something ordinary, even irritating. Such is the effect of overexposure. This happens not only with things, but more profoundly with people. Consider a person who makes themselves constantly available. At first, their presence is welcomed. They are seen as generous, kind, dependable. But over time, the expectation builds. Their constant yes becomes a requirement rather than a gift. Others begin to assume their availability. There is no longer a sense of gratitude, no longer any recognition of the sacrifice behind their presence. The person who gives and gives is no longer honored for their giving. They are simply expected to keep doing so. And eventually, if they cannot or will not, they may even be met with irritation or resentment. The more people see you, hear you, and access you without effort, the more they become accustomed to it. And once something becomes customary, it is often taken for granted. Familiarity can blind people to the true worth of someone's presence. The novelty wears off. The excitement fades. Where once there was admiration and respect, there can arise complacency. And worse still, where complacency grows, contempt is not far behind. It's a sad truth, but one that history and life repeatedly prove. Even the greatest leaders, when too often in the sight and hearing of their people, risk diminishing their influence. Their words lose their weight because they are heard too frequently. Their actions lose their power because they are seen too often. What once was rare becomes routine, and what is routine often loses its reverence. The same principle applies to all human relationships. Overexposure can cause even the strongest bonds to fray. The heart, it seems, needs space to fully appreciate what it loves. There is a reason absence makes the heart grow fonder. There is a reason the most precious things are not constantly on display. They are kept safe, brought forth at special times, and treasured all the more because they are not always within reach. Imagine a priceless painting. If it were hung in every home, seen on every wall, would it still hold the same value? Would people travel to see it? Would they stand in awe before it? No, it would become another image, another common sight. Its uniqueness would fade beneath its familiarity. The same can happen to you if you are not careful with your time, your energy, and your presence. Being everywhere for everyone, always available, always saying yes, may feel like generosity, but it risks reducing how others see you and how they treat you. It is not a reflection of their malice, but of human nature's tendency to overlook what is always at hand. People may not even realize they are losing respect for something they once held dear. But if you are always in the room, your absence will not be noticed. If your words are constant, their weight will not be felt. If your actions are never withheld, their significance will be lost. In the natural world, cycles of presence and absence give meaning. The moon waxes and wanes, and its phases are watched with anticipation. The tides rise and fall, and their rhythm is respected. Even the sun, as steady as it is, sets each night, and in its absence we long for its warmth and light to return. If the sun shone constantly without setting, its brilliance would be blinding, its warmth would become unbearable. Its constancy, which now gives life, would turn oppressive. So it is with people. When we are always present, always accessible, we risk becoming overexposed. And overexposure can wear down the sense of value others have for us, not because they are ungrateful or cruel, but because they have become too familiar with what they once saw as special. It is not a matter of hiding or withdrawing out of pride, but of understanding that scarcity often preserves worth, that space allows for longing, and longing deepens appreciation. We must learn when to step forward and when to step back, when to give freely and when to hold back for a time. It is in these moments of thoughtful absence that our presence retains its power. Too much exposure breeds familiarity, and unchecked familiarity can quietly become contempt. It is in knowing this truth that we protect our value and maintain the respect and appreciation we deserve. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are doors that we open and close with wisdom and intention. They are not barriers of pride, but safeguards of purpose. A person who understands the importance of boundaries is not distant or unkind. Instead, they are someone who recognizes the value of their time, energy, and calling. Boundaries are a way of saying to the world, I understand my worth. Without them, it becomes far too easy to be pulled in every direction, to be drained by every demand, and to lose the sense of purpose that gives life its meaning. When a person lives without boundaries, they often find themselves exhausted, resentful, and overlooked. They give until they have nothing left. They say yes when their heart cries no. They stretch themselves thin in the hope of pleasing everyone, only to realize that no one truly values what is always at their disposal. But when you set boundaries, you teach others how to treat you. You send a clear message that your time is valuable, your energy is limited, and your purpose is not to be squandered. You are not being cold or withholding love. You are practicing stewardship over the life you have been given. Setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. It is understanding that you are not infinite. Even the strongest among us have limits. Even the most generous hearts cannot pour endlessly without refilling. Boundaries allow you to step back and restore what is necessary to give your best. They create space for reflection, renewal, and growth. Without that space, your gifts become diluted. Your presence becomes something people expect, not something they appreciate. Your yes loses its meaning when it is never accompanied by a discerning no. Boundaries also preserve dignity. When you allow yourself to be constantly available, when you respond to every call and attend to every need, it can lead to being taken for granted. People may not mean to do it, but over time they stop seeing your sacrifices. They stop recognizing the effort it takes. They begin to assume that your availability is endless and your value diminishes in their eyes. But when you draw a line, when you are thoughtful about where you invest your time and energy, people are reminded that your presence is not something to be expected without gratitude. It is a privilege, not an entitlement. There is great wisdom in the example of nature. Consider the rivers that carve through the land. They have boundaries, banks that direct their flow. If they overflow without limit, they bring destruction instead of life. But when they remain within their banks, they give water to the fields and life to the creatures that depend on them. So it is with your life. When you have boundaries, you can bring life and meaning to those around you. Without them, you risk losing yourself and harming the very people you wish to help. Boundaries protect purpose. Each of us has been given a unique calling, a role to play in this life. But without boundaries, that purpose can become clouded. You can become so busy meeting the demands and expectations of others that you forget why you are here in the first place. You spend your days reacting instead of acting with intention. Boundaries give you the ability to focus on what matters most. They allow you to say, this is where I am needed. And just as importantly, this is where I am not. In that clarity, your actions gain meaning and your life moves with direction instead of drift. It is not selfish to set boundaries, it is responsible. It is not cruel to guard your time, it is necessary. When you respect your limits, you model for others how they might respect theirs. You show them that it is possible to be loving without being available to all people at all times. You demonstrate the truth that saying no to one thing is often saying yes to something greater, whether that is your health, your family, your purpose, or your relationship with God. In setting boundaries, you are not closing yourself off from the world. You are making space for the right things to grow in your life. You are preserving your dignity by honoring the finite gift of time you've been given. You are maintaining your value by not giving yourself away too cheaply or too quickly. And in doing so, you teach those around you to appreciate the moments you offer, the energy you bring, and the wisdom you share. People respect those who respect themselves. They may test your boundaries at first. They may question them or even challenge them, but in time, they will learn that you are not drawing lines out of arrogance, but out of understanding. You know who you are. You know what you are here to do. And because of that, you choose carefully where you invest your presence. A life without boundaries quickly becomes a life without peace. A person without boundaries soon finds themselves weary, worn, and empty. But a person who walks in wisdom, who sets clear limits with grace and firmness, preserves not only their own dignity, but also the dignity of their relationship. They make their yes mean something and their no stand with clarity. They become someone whose presence is valued because it is not overused. They live with purpose and they honor the life they've been given by setting boundaries that protect their worth and preserve their calling. Even precious things are not always on display. Diamonds, gold, and pearls are not found scattered on the streets, and their rarity is precisely what makes them valuable. If something can be found anywhere, anytime, by anyone, it quickly loses its worth in the eyes of those who come across it. What is common becomes familiar, and familiarity often leads to indifference. But what is rare is sought after, what is hidden is pursued, and what is precious is kept safe, revealed only at the right time and in the right way. Throughout history, treasures have always been hidden away. Kings and queens stored their gold and jewels in vaults behind thick walls, guarded carefully because of their immense value. No one left pearls lying about in the open. No one tossed rubies into the streets for all to grab as they passed by. These things were not only rare by nature, they were made rarer still by how carefully they were guarded. The fewer people who saw them, the more they were desired. The harder they were to obtain, the more people were willing to sacrifice to have them. Their value was not only in their beauty, but in their scarcity. This principle extends beyond precious stones and metals. It applies to people as well. There is something powerful about a person who knows their worth and does not feel the need to put themselves on constant display. They do not need to be seen by everyone all the time. They do not need to be everywhere at once. Their presence is not common, and because of that, it is valued. They are like a rare jewel, carefully kept, shown with purpose and intention, not spread out carelessly before all. When something is always visible, always present, it begins to lose its significance. People grow accustomed to it. What was once special becomes ordinary. It is not that its true worth has changed, but the perception of it has. And perception often guides how we treat the things and people around us. Even the most valuable diamond would be overlooked if it were as plentiful as gravel. If gold coins were scattered on every sidewalk, they would lose their appeal. But because they are not easily found, because they are not always visible, they are pursued with passion and handled with great care. In relationships, this truth is often overlooked. People sometimes believe they must always be available, always present, always in the spotlight to maintain connection or significance. But over time, constant visibility can wear down the sense of value others place on them. When someone is always ready to answer every call, to give all their time without pause, their presence can become expected rather than appreciated. But when they hold back at times, when they are deliberate about where and when they show up, they create space for their presence to be valued. They are not withdrawing out of pride or coldness, but out of an understanding that not everything precious should be constantly on display. Think about a great piece of art. It is placed in a museum, behind glass, under careful watch. People travel long distances just for a moment to stand before it. If that same painting were printed on every billboard, if it were hanging in every grocery store, would people still travel to see it? Would they still stand in awe of it? Most likely not. Its beauty would not be lessened, but its impact would. The same is true of a life lived with purpose. If we give everything to everyone all the time, we risk losing the sense of value that comes from being intentional, and reserved in how we offer ourselves to the world. Even nature shows us this wisdom. The most stunning flowers bloom for a season, not year-round. The stars appear when the sky is dark, not in broad daylight. The rarest birds are seen only by those who search patiently, not by those who expect them to be perched on every branch. Rarity calls for appreciation. It invites respect. It draws people in because it is not so easily obtained. A life that honors this truth is not a life of isolation, but of discernment. It is knowing when to reveal your brilliance and when to remain hidden for a time. It is understanding that your gifts, your talents, your presence are like treasures. They are not meant to be poured out without thought, but shared with care. This is not about withholding love or shutting yourself off from others. It is about knowing that even love, when freely given without boundaries, can be taken for granted if it is not cherished. There is wisdom in being selective. Not everyone needs full access to you. Not every situation requires your immediate attention. Just as not every jewel is displayed in the market, not every part of your life needs to be on constant show. There is dignity in keeping parts of yourself sacred, reserved for those who understand their worth and treat them accordingly. When something is precious, it is handled differently. It is guarded and protected. Its appearance is an event, not a routine. Its impact is greater because it is not common. Your life, your presence, your energy are the same. They are precious, and you have the responsibility to honor that by choosing when, where, and how you show up. Even precious things are not always on display because their rarity is what makes them shine brightest. When you understand this, you walk in quiet confidence, knowing that you do not need to be everywhere to be valued. You do not need constant exposure to have an impact. Like the diamond, the gold, and the pearl, you are at your most valuable when you honor your worth by living with intention and purpose. There is a deep and often overlooked power in absence. While much attention is given to being present, showing up, and making yourself seen and heard, there is a quiet wisdom in knowing when to step back. Sometimes it is not your presence that speaks the loudest, but your absence. Silence can say what words cannot. Distance can convey what nearness never will. A well-timed absence can give weight to your presence in ways that constant availability never can. The heart often learns to value something most when it is no longer easily within reach. Life teaches us again and again that people tend to take for granted what is always there. What is always available becomes expected, and what is expected is often underappreciated. It is not because people are cruel or ungrateful by nature, but because human hearts become used to what they consistently experience without effort. A voice always speaking eventually fades into background noise. A presence always present can start to blend into the scenery. But when a voice falls silent, when a familiar presence withdraws for a time, it creates space for reflection. It stirs something within those who have grown accustomed to its nearness. People begin to realize what they had and how much it meant when they no longer have it at their constant disposal. There is wisdom in withdrawing with purpose. It is not an act of punishment or pride, but an understanding of rhythm. Just as music needs silence between the notes, relationships and influence need moments of absence to create appreciation. A person who knows when to step forward and when to step back wields greater influence than one who is always in motion, always available. Absence creates anticipation. Anticipation deepens value. When you are not always present, when your words are not always spoken, others begin to lean in more closely when you do appear and when you do speak. This principle is seen clearly in nature. The seasons teach us that life has rhythms of growth and rest, of appearing and retreating. The trees do not bear fruit all year long. Flowers bloom for a season and then return to the quiet of the earth. Even the sun sets each day, allowing the world time to rest, time to cool, time to miss its warmth and light. Its absence makes its rising all the more meaningful. If the sun shone constantly, never setting, its heat would become unbearable, its light blinding. The rhythm of appearing and disappearing makes its presence welcome each new day. In human relationships, absence can be a gift when given at the right time and in the right measure. A friend who is always present, always near, may be loved deeply, but sometimes taken for granted. When that friend steps back, when their presence is missed, the heart grows in appreciation. It begins to reflect on their value, their kindness, and the warmth they brought. The same is true in leadership, in family, and in every meaningful connection. There is power in stepping back. There is power in letting others feel your absence so they can truly value your presence. Absence allows space for reflection. It gives others room to grow, to take responsibility, and to recognize their own strengths. Constant presence can sometimes become a crutch for those around you. They may lean too heavily on you, failing to develop their own wisdom or strength. But when you step back, they are given the opportunity to stand on their own. Your absence can be a teacher. It can give people a chance to rise to an occasion they may have otherwise ignored. In this way, your stepping back is not neglect, but trust. It is a sign of respect for their ability to grow and handle what they need to. When your absence is intentional and purposeful, your return carries more weight. Your words have more meaning. Your presence brings more comfort and significance. It becomes a moment people pay attention to because they understand it is not given lightly. It is not something to be dismissed or overlooked. Those who are always speaking often find their words ignored, but those who speak sparingly, after reflection and silence, find that their words carry greater authority. Their voice is sought after because it is not always available. This is not about manipulation or playing games with people's emotions. It is about living with wisdom and understanding human nature. Knowing when to be present and when to be absent requires discernment. It calls for humility and self-awareness. It requires a heart that is not desperate for constant affirmation, but confident in its value, whether near or far. Sometimes the greatest demonstration of strength is the ability to walk away for a time, to give others room to breathe, and to allow your absence to speak on your behalf. In the silence of absence, others are given the opportunity to hear what your constant words may have drowned out. In the stillness of your stepping back, others can see more clearly the shape and meaning of your presence. Letting your absence sometimes speak louder than your presence is a way of honoring both yourself and those around you. It preserves your value, it maintains the dignity of your voice, and it allows your return to carry new weight and renewed purpose. Life, in its deepest wisdom, shows us this pattern again and again. Light and darkness, speaking and silence, presence and absence, both are needed, both give meaning to the other. Knowing when to step back is just as important as knowing when to show up. And sometimes your absence will echo louder, longer, and with greater power than anything you could say or do in the moment. When you understand this, you become a person whose presence matters more because it is given with purpose and received with gratitude. Amen.